The DIESOL podcast.
Digital integration in English as a second or other language.
Episode 31, interview with Matt Miller.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 31. We are your hosts. I am Brent Warner.
And I'm Michelle Reyes. Hey, Brent.
How's it going?
It's going. It's still going. I'm going. 2020 just won't end.
This is the last episode of the year, though. We're gonna make it.
Yeah, and we're gonna go out with a bang because we've got to. Yeah.
Well, we got an excellent guest to help wrap up the end of the year. So Matt Miller, how are you?
I'm great. I'm thrilled to be with all of you. And yes, we are so close to the end of 2020. Let's just put this thing out of its misery and move on, shall we?
It's reaching distance. I even feel confident there will be people that are going to download, but not really listen till after we've made it through. So
there you go.
All right. Yeah. So Matt, I don't know that you need an introduction. I think you're fairly well known, but we'll give it to you anyway. So Matt Miller taught in public schools for more than 10 years, teaching all levels of high school Spanish. And in his career, he's planned more than nearly 12,000 class lessons. That's a heck of a number, Matt. And he taught more than 500,000 instructional minutes, and he graded for nearly 2,000 days of class. His blog, Ditch That Textbook, and 4 books have equipped and inspired tens of thousands of educators in more than 100 countries. He lives in West Central Indiana and says that he's living the dream, happily married with 3 kids, 2 dogs, and a mortgage.
Yes.
All right. So Matt, we are really happy to have you here. One of the reasons I was talking to Esol about having you on is, you're a language teacher, right? This is you have a ton of experience. You're well known for your books, Ditch That Textbook, and the whole series, and great keynotes and all of those fun things. But also, the digital integration for us with ESL and working with language learners. I know your kind of your background story is really aligned with a lot of what we think about and what we talk about. And so I know this is kind of your classic Matt Miller type of stuff, but we really wanted to talk about the idea of hey, how do we help our students with equitable and easy to access technology and maybe not have to work with a textbook all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is sort of my jam. I would agree. For me, I think I started to move in that direction when I started to realize that my Spanish textbooks basically were just not helping my students to become fluent speakers of the language the way that I wanted them to. Mm-hmm. I started teaching very much the way that I was taught when I was learning Spanish as a second language in high school. And so it was a lot of, activities out of the book, read this chapter, do these questions at the end of the chapter, workbook pages, worksheets, and all that. And, I kind of taught that way for 3 or 4 years. And I started to develop this little secret. And see, my principal didn't know this secret. And the other teachers in my building didn't know this secret. But my students all totally knew this secret. Boy, this is a recipe for disaster, isn't it? So my secret was that the students in my high school Spanish classes couldn't speak Spanish.
That is
students in my Spanish classes that couldn't speak Spanish. That's a problem, right? All of the students knew that, but and I just kept thinking oh my goodness, babies can acquire a language and they don't have to conjugate verbs and memorize long vocabulary lists. There's got to be a better way. And I just started kind of experimenting with different things. I started to think about how we acquire, I mean, this shouldn't be like an epiphany and like some crazy thought or anything, but I just started thinking like, how do we acquire language without learning it explicitly? And, we just started playing with it. We started doing some like storytelling activities. We started creating in using the technology with, images and just all sorts of different things. And little by little, I started weaning myself off of my textbooks till eventually I was like, man, I've got all of these activities that seem to be working a little bit better. I've got my curriculum lined up the way that I want it. Why do I need these textbooks again? And so I locked them up in a closet in the back of my room and we kind of quit using them. And it also allowed me to kind of like customize the vocabulary a little bit more. I would let my students add vocabulary words for things that they wanted to learn, which was cool that our textbooks never let us do, So, just little by little, I started putting this infrastructure into place where I didn't need the textbooks very much at all. And then eventually I didn't need them at all. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't, easy or quick or anything. Like I would spend days on my summer break, articulating curriculum across different levels. And my wife is like, don't you ever stop? Like, won't you just use the same lessons that you used last year? And I'm like, no, sorry, that's not me.
I know. I actually, I do the same thing too. And I'm like, I'm spending so much time rebuilding this and doing this in a new way, but I love it too at the same time. Right. So there are different parts to that, but I think one of the things, that, catches me about that conversation is the idea that like, I think a lot of people hear, okay, well, hey, if I'm not going to use a textbook, then I have to build everything from scratch, right?
Yeah.
And but you're saying no, you can pace through this, right? You can get into it over time. And so when you say, ditch that textbook or whatever, it doesn't mean you're done right now and throw it away and throw a match in the trash can.
But if you want to do that at some point, definitely get it on video. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, tag Matt.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're exactly right. And when I started, this whole name Ditch That Textbook started as a blog. It was just like a little free WordPress blog. And then I started doing some presentations by that name. And I didn't realize how controversial it was going to be just because I knew my own story. I was kind of surprised that people would tend to think that. And with me, a lot of the whole get rid of the textbooks thing, it almost feels a little bit like cheating in a way, because the way that I got rid of my textbooks was by examining a whole bunch of textbooks. Yeah. So, when textbook adoption comes around and you get all those samples and you hang on to them and you stick them in your closet and everything, I pulled like 5 or 6 textbook samples out and I looked at their scope and sequence and I looked at what they were teaching and in what order and what words they were teaching and vocabulary and stuff. And I thought, okay, what do I like? What do I not like? What do I want to throw out? What do I want to add? See, I was also very fortunate that I was a one-person foreign language department. So I had all of the classes, all the way from Spanish 1. That's how you got away with
your secret.
Yeah, I know. See, I'm dishing all of my secrets on DIESOL. So that did make it a little bit easier for me. But, really, all of us have, no matter what class we teach, all of us have a set of standards, and there is no set prescribed individual only way to teach to those standards. And so I basically looked at the standards and I looked across all of those textbooks and I figured out, okay, I'm going to teach all of these things in this different way. And then I started looking at all of the pieces and I thought, how can I break them into thematic units? And I tried to make up some of my own thematic units. So I would pull, like a handful of grammar structures and a couple of lists of vocabulary, put them in one package and thought, what's a topic we can talk about with all of this stuff? And so then I just started kind of like building that little by little, and across all 4 of the levels, I came up with lists of vocabulary, sets of grammar structures, and I started just writing them into my own study guides. So the study guides were, here's how you conjugate verbs in the present progressive. Here's how I describe it in my own words. Here's a list of vocabulary words. That's one study guide. And then after a while, I made up enough of those study guides written in my own words, the way that I was going to describe it anyway. And that's the point when I started to really realize I don't need these textbooks that much. And so from there, that's the foundation. That's the structure of the whole thing. And, so I set that structure up. And then after that, it was just a matter of building activities to support, proficiency and fluency in those areas. And so, I started to come up with, a handful of different kinds of activities that I could kind of replicate over and over again. Kind of feels like edu protocols, like those things that, I love how they call those lesson frames. It's like a picture frame, like the frame stays the same, but the picture inside changes. So like the content changes. I started doing some of those too. And after that, I had a sustainable way of teaching languages that didn't require the textbooks. And it was nimble and agile because I could go into one of the Google Docs and change one of the study guides, just like any moment that I wanted to. And, so that was kind of like, when you say ditch that textbook, yeah, I did quit using my textbooks, but it was in large part because I used textbooks to get there. I don't know if that's cheating, but if it is, okay, I'm a cheater.
No, what's funny when you mentioned that, I was thinking most people do this, right? This is a process, but I think the traditional structure of doing that was like people would do that over a couple of years, and then they would turn that into their own textbook, and they would submit that to they would submit that into the corporations and say, hey, I want to have my textbook, right? And so what I really appreciate is like your thinking, and I think this is more of a modern thinking for teachers too, is like, we don't have to charge. We don't have to it's not a money-making venture. It's an educational venture that helps students and gets some engagement going on. So I really appreciate that, and how that, that turned into something that you could turn around and help the students with.
And along that same line, there was one part of it that I didn't expect until later. So if somebody's hearing this and they're like, oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do, I'm going to go start it right now. The one thing that I didn't expect is that after I had done that for several years, I basically taught, my own curriculum that still supported the standards, that was not based out of the textbook. And then eventually at some point I left the district and I took a job at another school. And so when I did that, I realized that when I didn't adopt textbooks, I didn't get brand new textbooks, I should say. We decided to keep the old textbooks on. And so I just locked them up in the closet and everything. But if I had done what you said, Brent, like throw them on the dumpster and light a match, then the incoming teacher would have had to basically teach from my notes, which would have been really hard. So it is kind of nice to have that structure there as a backup plan, or in case, if I needed some kind of, heaven forbid, some sort of surgery, or if something happened in my family and I had to take time off or something, there would have been that support there. So anyway, that was one part of it that I didn't expect. So if anybody hears this, don't light that match yet.
Yeah. So Matt, one of the things that I'm thinking of as you're mentioning the process you used to come up with, looking at the textbooks and then coming up with your own material. I used to teach, and I teach English as a second language now, or second or other language now. But before, I was working at a reservation, and I was in their language revitalization project, and my job was to learn their language. In this case, it was Serrano. And then I had to create the first ever children's curriculum for the children to learn that language. And one of the things that I did, because I thought, well, where do I start? And so I did what you did, is looked at all these textbooks, language textbooks, looked at the scope and sequence, looked at what words they were learning first, and then took those, transferred them to that language. And then, because, not everybody's going to agree that this language should be taught, I had to align it to the K through 12 standards to make sure that if anybody was going to complain or have an issue with, like, why are you teaching it this way? Well, you know what, it's aligned to the standards. But so I'm wondering what kind of results you saw in the classroom. What was the effect of having you, change the way that you approach the textbook, and what was your experience?
Yeah. for a little while, when I was still trying to get my feet under me and I was still trying to get a handle on all of it, it's like any sort of transition. You even look in just schools in general, and you start a school improvement plan of any sort, and there are changes involved. And if you're trying to watch the standardized test scores to see how well you're doing, that first year, you usually see that dip, because you're still making the adjustments and making the changes. And so I saw a little bit of the dip, and of course, not knowing any better, that concerned me. And it made me wonder if I had just broken my entire curriculum, my entire department, if I'd broken all of these kids, and little by little, I think what happened was, because I was using something that I had sort of created, now all of a sudden, the way we were doing it mattered to me. It used to be, it was coming out of the textbook, and I'd be like, why in the world are we learning this vocabulary set with this unit and this group of grammar? Like, these don't fit together at all. And why in the world, I had all these why in the world questions, and I had less of those whenever I had figured it out on my own. There was that. And, little by little, after I started explaining things in my own words through those study guides, instead of the canned explanation in the book, kids started to get it in a little bit different way. We started putting an emphasis on conversational Spanish. And so I started to see the results when, I would hear Spanish words in the hallway. There's one time I was standing behind some of my students in the lunch line, and we had just been watching a movie in Spanish with the English subtitles on. And they were saying, I think it was Finding Nemo. And so they were singing Just Keep Swimming, which was nadaremos, nadaremos. And I was like, my ears are like, oh, wow, they're doing it, and it was just like little by little, after I got out of that dip and it started to come up a little bit, those were some of the places so I'm so glad that you asked about results. Those are some of the places I saw them. And, being a Spanish teacher, other than the AP exam, we don't really have anything standardized test wise to be able to measure that stuff. So that's the way that I measured results. I measured it with my eyes. I measured it with my ears. I measured it when the interactions in the hallway, just in little places where I could feel what their fluency was like. And, the parents started to see it too. So they were thrilled. They didn't even realize how I was getting there. If they were paying attention, then they knew that I wasn't using the textbook. But I think a lot of them that didn't really occur to them. And so all they knew was that some of their kids, especially the freshmen, the younger ones, and they learned some words and they could go home and speak Spanish, and parents didn't have any idea what they were talking about. They would come home and they would jabber in Spanish, and I would meet them at parent teacher conferences, and they'd be like, oh my goodness, I took 3 years of Spanish and I can't speak a word. And now my kid has been in Spanish for 9 weeks, and now they're like having a whole conversation. And it's just like little things like that were where I started to see the results, but they didn't come immediately. It took a little bit of patience.
So let's talk a little bit about the technology. That's what we talk, so I guess probably people are wondering about like what your setup was, right, in the classroom. What were you? Sure. Did you have a computer lab? Did you have students, BYOD, all that type of thing, or however that was? And then actually, if we follow up with that, what software? What were you using to engage the students?
Yeah. I ran the gamut, seriously. In 11 years teaching high school Spanish, I started out with one teacher desktop computer in my room for taking attendance. And that was it. But we had computer labs. Yeah. That's exactly what it was. Yes. That was back when I had to beg, borrow, and steal LCD projectors from other places because they didn't have them in every single room. So I started out with that. So we did a lot of stuff in the computer labs. That was a lot of like web quests and stuff like that. Our school got rolling laptop carts, which was a huge deal. And they had those external batteries, the like great big ones that you could plug in to the power port of your laptop, and it would give them a little bit of extra life. Mm-hmm. And that was the time I was still teaching out of the textbook there, and they had these CD-ROMs that went with the textbook. And so they had some extra little activities and stuff. And that was actually kind of a big moment for me in educational technology, my class. Cause you see, those kids got those laptops out and they plugged in their little earbuds. I had a whole great big set of like class earbuds with like alcohol wipes so they could clean them off before it, because it's their ears.
Thank you.
Thank
You for considering the sanitation of the students.
Yeah. And so anyway, they had their earbuds in, they put their CD-ROMs in, and they're like listening and practicing and stuff. And I remember there was a moment I stepped back and I kind of like crossed my arms and I looked at this classroom and I was like, this is the classroom of the future. Look at this. Look at that. Look at how this is amazing. They're all working on laptops like this. And I was like, look how innovative I am. Look how good of a teacher I am. Where's the superintendent? Where's the principal? Where's the newspaper? Like, where's the TV cameras, you know? And at some point it dawned on me that what they were doing on those CD-ROMs was not much different than what we were doing in our workbook pages. It was a lot of drill and kill and so there was a moment there where my crossing my arms, sticking my chest out, being all proud of everything. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is no different. And so that was my big Sammer moment, this is just substitution or maybe augmentation, you could say, but if you really want to get something out of that, out of that technology, then you got to go further than that. And the next school that I went to, I had, this is the craziest setup. I had 1-to-1 desktop computers.
Oh.
They were in these little this little student desks, and they had flat screen monitors at the back of the desk. There was a little tray that would pull out that had the keyboard, and then along the side was the tower for the computer. And they were clunky and they were slow. And I had all these big plans for them, and it took 10 minutes for them to start up at the beginning of class. Sometimes it was so
I remember
bad.
that process of going around and turning on all the computers before students got there so that you're ready for them. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yes, exactly. That was it. And so, I started to get a little bit better at innovating beyond just substitution with my technology, but the computers were still sort of a limiting factor. But then finally, I got a rolling laptop cart of my own that lived in my classroom with Chromebooks in it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the Chromebooks. Nice. That was beautiful. And those were the days right before Google Classroom showed up. And so Google Classroom comes in and that simplifies the grading process and the assignment management process. And, a lot of the really good apps and tools and stuff were starting to really come out there. And I finally started to really hit my stride on what can my kids create with the language? That was when things started to change. It wasn't how can we do flashcards and how can we conjugate verbs and because you need to do some of that stuff. But sure. It really started to change whenever I started to get into that creation mode. And, even if the language wasn't perfect, even if it was messy, I still wanted them to make things with the language anyway. And so, I hope I didn't go on too long with that. That's the big, long evolution that I had from barely any technology, if I could get my hands on it, to slow, clunky technology, to finally something a little faster and a little more meaningful.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because you talk about those as being, several years back or whatever, but there's still teachers that are dealing with those exact setups, right? And so I think part of it is encouraging, hey, whatever setup you have, wherever you're at, you can work with your students to get things going, right? And now, of course, the computers are in their hands, right? And so we have so many options of working with mobile devices and letting our students engage in that way. And I think there's a lot of fun things for teachers to start exploring with, even if they don't have a great school set up, or if the school's not providing them with everything, they can still kind of make adjustments to start connecting with their students too.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you.
Okay, so Matt, so now you you help a lot of teachers kind of understand different ways to actually engage with technology, building communication, all of those types of things. Let's run through just a couple of your favorites these days. Like, what are some of the things that you like to use or you like to share with teachers for interactive activities with their students, and especially if obviously focusing on language building, but what are you using to connect teachers with their students and build some real engagement?
Yeah. See, for me, I'm not one of those like flashy, brand new, what's cool, what's hot, what's, new on the scene type of technology guys. Like, I'm still an enormous, huge fan of Google Slides.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Of course, if you're Microsoft, then PowerPoint fits with that as well. And, there are a million things you can do in a language classroom with Google Slides. Some of my favorites, I really like the idea of photo comic strips, where you take a picture with your webcam and then you insert a shape that looks like a speech bubble or a thought bubble, and you add some text to it. And then you take another picture and you add another speech bubble, and you take another picture and you add another speech bubble. The neat thing about that is students can kind of act out the things that they want to communicate in the pictures that they take. And then, they become the stars of the activity. It's their faces that's on that activity. So I think that is, that's super cool. And it's a fun way to do dialogue. It also helps them to see kind of like naturally, which set of pronouns they're going to use. So, is it like the first person, the third person, like, it helps them to see that a little more naturally. So I love that.
You know what? That's making me think of, I'm sorry, Matt, I'm going to interrupt.
Just because I just got an idea too.
Okay, let's share all of our ideas. So my idea was, and Esol, sorry if I'm stealing yours from under you, but my idea is you can then go on to Voice Recorder Online, record your audio of it, and now with the Google Slides, you can click on the play audio buttons that you can plug in the audio directly onto the slides. So you could actually have students have their voice on the comic strips connected together with it, so they can also practice their speaking and their pronunciation at the same time.
That's fancy.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the students, the population that I work with. They have such big trouble, and in general, with reported speech. So now you could have the comic, and you could have them retell the story or whatever it is. And now they could either write it out, but now it has to be changed into reported speech. And then, of course, you could also record that, do a voice recording. And but yeah, so ideas awesome. Floating around.
Triple stack.
Yeah. Well, I'll even riff on my own idea there and say, hey, if you do a photo comic strip and you have the pictures and the speech bubbles and stuff, you could take that slide presentation. So you could do 2 or 3 or 4 pictures with speech bubbles on each slide, do, like 2 or 3 or 4 slides or something, turn on Screencastify or Loom, and now you're recording the screen and you can narrate over the top of it. And so you go to that first slide, you have them read it, you have them narrate it, flip to the next slide, and now you've got a video recording of it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, Google Slides is a good one. Other things that I like are the shared Google Slides presentations where, if you have 24 students, then you create a Google Slide presentation with 24 slides. Each kid gets a slide and you have them do a prompt or an activity. Sometimes whenever I show that to teachers, they're like, yeah, but what if how are you going to make it so they don't look at each other and get the right answers? And my answer to that is you don't want to ask questions that have a specific answer to them. That kind of defeats the purpose. So it's like a writing prompt or a storytelling or something like that. I love that. There's infographics that you can do. If you pull in icons from like the Noun Project or a flat icon and have them pair a little icon with a little snippet of text, and then they can either tell stories or do things in list form or how-tos or, that would be really good for commands, I think. So any of that stuff, slides could be used. Yeah. So many different ways.
I love that. Yeah,
I love that.
yeah. We were just playing. We did a little presentation recently, like an Edu Protocols and ESL presentation.
Oh, nice.
And we did the Numbers Mania, which was kind of same type of thing. We're building the infographics with it and all of those things. And I don't think we talked about this on an episode, Esol, but we talked about it for a presentation, which was. I used it for having my students do research on the book that we were going to read. So they said, hey, here's a bunch of different numbers, whatever it is, go find some information on this book and on this author. And then they're pulling in those icons and then writing up little speech, little parts on it. And then, and then one of my favorite parts of doing this is if you find an author who's online or who's on Twitter, then I tweet those out to them and then they respond back, right? So I use Firuze Dumas, and she writes this book, or she has this book called Funny and Farsi, which it's this excellent, fun, and kind of accessible book for the students. But then she's online, and then I say, hey, these are the names of a few students who actually built these things, and then she comes back and she like rah-rahs them, and they're all excited to see the connection.
Yeah.
We're reading her book and she's actually talking to me too. So that technology connection wouldn't exist before, right? You could never do that before. You could write a letter to someone in the past or send an email, but like now it's I love it. It's such a great way to connect.
It's audience, isn't it? I mean,
right.
It's authentic. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they can create, first of all, for an audience of their classmates, but then you can take it and share it, with the author. And oh my goodness, the rah-rah from the author is like huge. So that's super cool. While we're on slides, before we move on to something else, I wanted to throw one more quick thing out there. I've built a whole bunch of Google Slides templates that people can make a copy of and assign directly to their students. And a lot of them are really good fits with language. For instance, I've got several of them that replicate social media platforms. Like I've got one for Instagram stories and for Twitter and for Snapchat games. A Spotify one, a Yelp one, like a whole bunch of stuff you could do with language. If anybody wants to go to ditchthattextbook.com/templates, I've got all of them available for free there. You can just go over there and just make a copy into your drive. So, So anyway, there's like this great big repository of Google Slides templates that I've built over the years. That's all in that one spot. If anybody wants to go check it out.
Awesome. Yeah. So Matt, I do a lot of tech trainings in my organization as well. And I've, one of my go-to here, teachers, you must know this, is your website because of the templates. Yes. And so I just wanted to go back to mentioning how just simply using icons, even though you're using something so simple as an icon, the fact that now there's a pictorial something like a representation of text or whatever it is that they're coupling it with, students are able to internalize. I think there's more levels or more layers of internalization. We know that especially language learners need images, right? And so when they can connect those things, it helps them to internalize. And it goes back to where you said you were measuring by listening in the hallways to hear your students using it, right? And so then it's like, oh, you've internalized it. That's now part of your lexicon. That's not part of who you are. You speak it and you're using it in the appropriate context. But so you were going to move on to something different.
Yeah. No, I mean, we can keep going. I'm a big fan of Flipgrid too. It feels like everybody's a big fan of Flipgrid these days. I think it's, honestly, this will sort of date me from how long it's been since I've taught Spanish, but Flipgrid didn't really exist the way that it does now when I was teaching. But my goodness, I think, especially with as powerful as the video editing options are in Flipgrid, like all the stuff you can create with language in a moment's notice and then be able to share it with the class if you want to is super cool. And then there's one other thing I'll throw in there too. If students are kind of hung up on being on video and they're not as excited about that, if you want them to have the audio practice, there's another tool called Synth. You can go to gosynth.com. It's kind of like an audio version of Flipgrid. They call it podcasting in small bites. And so, you can record a little audio clip, and then students can reply to each other's audio clips. So it becomes almost like nested conversations like Reddit, only it's done with audio. So it's kind of a natural way to follow a conversation in small bite-sized audio. It's kind of like having an audio conversation asynchronously.
That's awesome.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've never heard of that one. Can you spell that out for us?
Yeah, it's Synth, SYNTH. So it's gosynth.com.
GoSynth. Okay. Got it. That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Matt, one thing we're thinking about, I think we're all dealing with COVID, right? It's still here at the moment. And I imagine, in the past you're traveling all over the place, right? You're keynoting there, you're doing workshops here, right? All of those types of things. And now most of us are stuck. And so I'm imagining that you're also kind of reimagining conversations, not just for your workshops or presentations, but for students and like talking, because now what people want is like, well, how do I do this all online, right? And we could talk about individual things, but I guess really what I'm kind of wondering for you, because you're interacting with so many different teachers and seeing different things, what are you starting to think of or see as the kind of like the next steps, the future? Like what are you imagining that people are going to be doing online for their learning? And do you have any kind of futurism predictions here, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Oh, I'm really bad at these. But I'll play along for you, Brent.
Sure.
One direction that I really like, that I see education going, and actually I'm seeing more of it with sort of the online remote learning, concurrent learning, hybrid learning, all of that is incorporating more choice into learning. And so I think the more that teachers get comfortable with that, I think the more that they see how it can be done without just saying like, okay, here's our class, now just go learn whatever you want. You just make this class whatever you want. And, the truth is that it doesn't obviously have to be that way. There are small choices you can give students, and then it kind of extrapolates out. But I've found that as we've gone to more asynchronous remote learning, giving students, letting them do things kind of on their own time, that has kind of lended itself to giving them more choice. And so I feel like this is just a gut feel thing, but, from following social media and from the conversations I've had with teachers, that I think we're starting to see what a little bit more choice looks like. Maybe that's one of the, every once in a while you hear people talking about the silver lining that is going to come out of all of this. And maybe this is one of them, that we start to see what a little more of this choice looks like. And so, that's definitely one thing. That's really one thing that I really love out of all of this.
I've seen, I don't know. I'm seeing more presentations and more people talking about like choice boards, right? And that whole thing. So it's like, it takes work to set those up, right? That's the biggest problem with the with the choice boards. And for those who don't know, for those who don't know, the choice boards is could be like a tic-tac-toe grid with like, hey, you have 9 different possible activities, and you get to choose like a 3 in a row that are going to be the 3 activities that you're going to do, or something like that. But that also means that a teacher has to set up 9 activities.
And see, I'll even take that a different direction and go, if somebody looks at a 5x5 bingo board and they think, holy cow, I can't make 25 activities, or 24 if you give them a free space in the middle. One direction that you could go with that is you could have 5 variations across the top and 5 variations down the bottom or down the side. So, it could be kind of like, create a video is 1, create something in audio is 2, create an image is 3, write in text is 4, or do something, artistic or drawing or whatever is 5. There are your 5 across the top.
Right.
And then your 5 down the side could be use this vocabulary list, this one. So in that case, you don't have to really come up with 25 different activities. It could be different variations, then that makes it there are little things like that, that I think that's one of the big misconceptions when it comes to differentiated instruction and choice like that. Like, I co-authored the book, Don't Ditch That Tech, which is kind of like a digital differentiation book. And that was one of the myths that we tried to crush, is that you don't need to make 25 different assignments for 25 different kids. If you help them to figure out how to adjust little by little, and if you provide some, simple ways that they can adjust to fit their needs and everything, it can all be done. And of course, your technology can help you do some of that stuff too. So yeah, I totally hear you on the choice boards thing. And I think that is a real thing, but I think there's some things that we can do to sort of defeat that a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Cause I love the idea of the choice boards. I just see, as the teacher's eyes glaze over when you're like, hey, you're going to make 25 activities for a 30-minute class or whatever. They're like, no, thank you. I'm going to pass.
They give you the stink eye.
Okay. So, Matt, there's a lot of different things to talk about and think about here, but, I know you've also the timing of this, we're coming in right in the middle of your summit. So can you share a little bit about Ditch Summit?
Yes, I would love to. So this is the 5th year for the Ditch Summit, really the Ditch That Textbook Digital Summit. It's a free online conference for teachers that I've put on for the last 5 years. I actually did a version of this with Q for a couple of years. And so, it's basically just a whole bunch of video presentations. I select presenters to come in and present what they're passionate and knowledgeable about. And I try to pick topics that I know people are, interested in, things that can be very practical. And over the last 5 years, we've amassed a library of, I think now more than 60 video presentations by all sorts of different educators and, various walks of education, different age groups, lots of different topics. And, of course, it's all asynchronous. It's all recorded. So you can come in and you can watch the presentations. You can generate a certificate of completion for professional development credit for any of them. Remember, there's more than 60 of them. So do the math on that for your PD hours. And there's a hashtag. The Ditch Summit hashtag is usually hopping whenever this is going on because people are sharing what they're learning. So it runs from December 14th through January 8th this year. And one of the unique things about it is that you can only watch the videos when the summit is open. I want it to feel a little bit like a real conference, where you show up at the location, you're there for a few days, everybody's there, but then everybody goes home. So it's kind of the same idea there, but we've got some really, really great presentations this year that'll be brand new. And we've got 5 years worth of other presentations that you can go watch as well. So if anybody's interested in signing up for it, did I mention it's free? Because it's free. It's not even one of those watch for free, but you can buy lifetime access for $59. Like, we don't have that. We don't have sponsors. It's just really free. But if you want to go sign up for it, it's at ditchsummit.com. That's where you can get signed up, and it will start on December 14th. Actually, it started on December 14th. I forget how this is going.
We're traveling through time here.
Yeah, exactly. It'll run through January 8th.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's some great speakers. I'm looking at the lineup and it is great.
Yeah, well, I log in. I log in pretty much every year, I think, and I'm just like, oh, I want to see that. I want to see that. So there's always good stuff going on. So definitely worth checking out. Okay, so we are wrapping things up. Esol, fun finds.
It is time for our fun finds.
Yay.
Yep. And this time around, as I've been saying in the last few episodes, it's important to take care of yourself, especially if you feel isolated like me. I miss my students. I miss my colleagues. I miss the classroom. And so one of the things I recently purchased that I find useful nowadays, especially now that the election is over and we can breathe a little more calmly, it's essential oil. And it's the Peace and Harmony blend by Now. N-O-W. It's one of the lower end essential oils. I have a lot of friends that are into the higher end essential oils, but this one's an essential oil you can put on when you want to relax or right before bed. And it's got like I think it's cinnamon and a couple of other
on essential oil. Do you just like drip it on your face, or like?
No, you could dab it on your wrists, but you need an oil diffuser. So it's sort of like you can just get one from like Target.
Oh, yeah. You put it, mix it with the water, and it
you mix it with the water,
spray,
and it sprays out some spray, and then it smells really good.
Nice.
Okay. But that's my fun find.
All right. Mine is nooks.in. So I was at a conference recently, the Dutchie conference, which is Directors of Educational Technology, California Higher Education, which is a mouthful and whatever that is. But anyways, a good conference, but they had this thing called Nooks, and basically it was kind of a back channel / interactive Zoom replacement type of thing. It's a little hard to describe, but it was so great and so engaging, because basically what can happen is you can get into little groups with people live like you do in Zoom or whatever else, but you can also see the presenters talking at the same time, and you can talk to the few people with your voice. You can jump around to different rooms, you can check in, you can peek in on rooms before you join them. There's all sorts of little funky things that are really much more like the natural conference feeling, where you're interacting with people, that just doesn't happen so much when you're on Zoom or Google Meet or anything else like that. And so I'm just super interested in this right now, and I want to see what might happen with it. So nooks.in, it's worth looking into. It seems fairly new. I don't know much about it, because today's the first time I experienced it, but it's really worth looking at. So I think it's just called nooks.in. Matt, what do you got?
So I've been recording podcasts and videos and different things like that for several years. And I've been using the same old USB microphone. I've had my trusty Audio Technica ATR 2100 USB microphone.
Good old Audio Technica.
Oh yeah, that's right. You got to love it. And eventually it started to develop a short, and it just wasn't reliable for me anymore. And so I finally had to pull the trigger and get a new USB microphone. So if you are wanting to do some podcasting, if you want to record videos, if you want to have something that sounds good on video calls or something, I just bought an Audio Technica 2020. So it's an AT 2020 microphone. They've got the regular AT 2020, which is a nice high quality USB. You just plug it right into your laptop or, your computer or your Chromebook or whatever. And it just hooks right up. I actually splurged and got the AT 2020 Plus,
Ooh,
which has a
so
microphone
fancy
volume. Yeah, I know. That's right. It doesn't actually have any extra features. It just has a plus on it. No, but it lets you adjust the microphone volume, and it also lets you mix between in your headphones. You can mix between what you hear through your computer and what you hear through your microphone. So you get the perfect blend and everything. It's pretty nice. So if you're looking for something that'll sound good, the AT 2020 is a good one. And then if you want those extra fancy features, throw the Plus in there too.
All right.
Cool.
Plus it is.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you're listening, you could win a one-of-a-kind DIESOL pin by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're giving a shout out any other way, just make sure you tag us on social media. And then, Matt, you're getting one for being a guest on the show, so we'll get that to you.
Woohoo!
For show notes and other episodes, please check out diesel.org. And then this show is diesel.org/31. And of course, you can listen to us at Voice Ed Canada. That's voiced.ca. We are on Twitter and all sorts of other things, but mostly Twitter. So you can find the show at DieselPod, and you can find me at Brent G. Warner.
You can find me, Esol, at ixy_pixie. That's IXY_PIXY. And Matt, where
and
can
you can find you can find me on Twitter at @JMattMiller. That's the letter J, Matt with 2 T's, Miller.
And Matt, there are other ways that people can find you too. So throw out all your resources.
Yes, I'd love to. So ditchthattextbook.com is the main website. In fact, if I can make kind of like a free giveaway to the people that are listening to this, I've got these 3 free ebooks available on my website. If you sign up for my email newsletter, which is where, I'm sharing all of the, practical teaching ideas you can use right away. You can get that by going to ditchthattextbook.com/101. Those are probably the best things that I can offer.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool.
In Estonian, thank you is aita. Aita for tuning in to the DIESOL podcast.
Thanks, everybody.
See you soon. See you next year.